Welcome back to another episode of Built and Backed. Joining me today is Raja Ghawi, a partner at Era Ventures, a venture capital firm he joined at inception in 2022 to drive transformational change in our physical world. Raja, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Raja's full bio is included in our show notes for our listeners to see his impressive career history. But that's where I'd love to start off today with this episode, Raja, is having you give an overview of who you are and what you do.
My name is Raja Ghawi. I'm a partner at Adventure, as you mentioned. At Air Ventures, we invest in innovation in the physical world, broadly defined. We think of ourselves as sector specialists, but business model generalists. So we don't only invest in sort of software or vertical AI. It's actually a minority of what we do. We're a lot more excited about physical AI, about fintech, about AI-first operators, about businesses that use sort of multi-sided capital structures to deploy against sort of real-world physical asset type use cases. Basically, what I sometimes call gnarly business models, but really heavy businesses where they create sort of long-term enduring compounding value. We started on this journey sort of about 3 or so years ago. Prior to that, I helped start up and scale a corporate venture capital fund at Suffolk called Suffolk Tech. Suffolk is a major national construction player, and that fund focused on innovation sort of in and around construction technology. My training was sort of as a generalist. I worked at McKinsey for several years out of the Boston office, got exposed to fintech and AI and sort of before they were super hypey, call it 2016 to 2018. And I'm a bioengineer by background, so I studied bioengineering at Harvard. What got me really excited about sort of this industry and how I ended up moving from, call it biology in college, sort of investing in robots and marketplaces today, is really sort of a deep family tie. So I grew up in Syria. Both my parents were architects. My grandfather ran an engineering shop way back in the day. So as a kid, I was surrounded by sort of drawings and schematics. And my parents would drive me and my sister around and be like, we designed these buildings, they're great. We know the engineers and architects behind that want to stay away. And I feel a lot of us sort of investing, working in and around the physical world have that deeper tie as well, which makes the work even more meaningful.
Yeah, and I love that you had that personal touch that really brought you into your career. And too, I mean, even just hearing from what you've gone through on your journey and also through your bio, I'm like, wow, he's had done like a little bit of everything so far in your career.
I was lucky sort of to sample a few different things. In college, I only studied sciences and a little bit of, call it, sort of the arts and the social sciences. I never took a single economics class. So I viewed my time in consulting as an extension to my liberal arts education. I said, let me try and sample sort of as many industries and functions as I could and find what I really like. And I found the industries that I liked. Found the use cases, but sort of ultimately the people. So I ended up following people that I admired, that I really wanted to work with, to partner with, and that's how I ended up here.
Oh yeah, and that's actually was going to be my next question is I know you joined at Inception about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And so I'd love to hear more about that, like how that opportunity came about and how you knew it was the right choice for you.
So I got to know Clelia shortly after we all went to quarantine. So I was at Suffolk. We had just launched Boost, which was a construction tech accelerator program. And Clelia has a lot of experience with accelerators from her experience at MetaProp. We ended up connecting over Zoom. And when the sort of accelerator was in full swing, I was like, well, sort of, I know you're at Bain Capital Ventures right now. It's not what you're doing, sort of super early stage startups, but like I would love to your advice. She ended up joining us as part of the selection committee. So her and I got to review sort of the 88 applicants for Boost. One, we chose the five companies of that first cohort. One of them is actually Passive Logic, which was Era's first investment. Over the course of the subsequent years, Kalai and I kept sort of in touch. We had very similar perspectives on the industry, on call it the kinds of businesses required to really move the needle and make these sort of physical world industries a lot better for all participants. And then when she decided sort of like start on her own and raise Air Fund One, She asked me if I wanted to join, and we spent a lot of time sort of talking about what that would look like, and ended up moving from Boston to New York to partner up with her.
And I'd love to hear some of your favorite, I guess, moments throughout the past few years. So it could be some portfolio companies that you've worked with that you've been really grateful to be a part of, or even anything else within this short time that has made you feel really proud.
Um, I was like, all my babies are my favorite babies. What are you talking about?
I know, no favorites here.
No, I mean, we're lucky that we have so many founders in our portfolio who are doing sort of a really amazing job. Um, I would say we invested in a company called Shepherd very early on in their journey. So Justin and Moore, the co-founders, I had a lot of conviction in that use case during my time at Suffolk. Basically, what they're doing was AI-powered construction insurance. So they're able to get sort of a lot of the data generated on construction sites by all the different sort of businesses and players on the site using the latest sort of tools and technologies, and sort of incorporate that into their insurance underwriting and provide more competitive quotes to basically players that they perceive to be safer based off of their digital footprint. Um, I have a lot of conviction in that sort of type of use case, and that there's a lot of value that they can capture that other insurance companies will continue to be blind to for years, and that arbitrage was quite meaningful. So when I joined Era and we started Fund One, I was like, oh, yeah, like we have to invest in Justin and Mom. Like this is a great play. They had maybe a month of sales when we first partnered up with them. They have since just like absolutely blown it out of the water. And it's sort of one of the sort of success examples that we tout to say sort of our industry ties and our deep knowledge of the space allows us to see things before they're obvious. Uh, and I don't want to sort of overshare about like the success of this business, but they're just absolutely crushing it.
Yeah, and for you, that must be so gratifying to have been a part of it from such like an early stage and throughout that time, just watch it, as you say, just completely accelerate in its growth and success from there.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to the team. They're doing all the hard work. I joke that as a VC, we take sort of 3 or 4 decisions a year. That's all we do. And the founders are the ones like this virtually hustling. But it is sort of quite gratifying to be part of that journey always.
Totally. And one thing you mentioned earlier that I have a question for you about is that you really focus on innovation in the physical world and different industries within that. And so I know you mentioned it's more of like a broad description, but what would you describe as those types of industries that you typically work with, or any that tend to be the most popular?
Um, I mean, popularity comes in seasons. But the way we define the physical world is sort of it's about 65% of US GDP and a little bit more globally. It encompasses real estate, encompasses construction, agriculture, energy, sort of urban mobility, manufacturing, basically anything that touches people using materials, being financed to put things up or into the world, sort of physical things.
Mhm.
Uh, so we've invested so far in sort of construction insurance. We've invested in home maintenance subscription services. We've invested in robots that clean parking lots and garages. We have looked at automations for factories that are sort of prefabricating homes, preparing sort of food meals. It's a wide gamut that is under our purview that way. But the way we sort of distill it, I think the common thread is your business helping against labor, materials, or capital? Is it giving us leverage for intellectual but really physical labor? Is it helping us, if not make new materials, sort of produce cheaper, better energy, and these source materials more efficiently from new sources that are more cost competitive at the same quality? And then how are you helping with the capital stack that needs to sort of finance all these activities? It's the debt, it's the equity, it's the insurance, especially when it comes to hard assets. Um, there's a lot of nuances to the way you finance, not just sort of like the assets, but the balance sheet of these businesses.
Mhm.
We spend a lot of time working with founders on these kind of creative and innovative business setups as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what you shared that a lot of these industries are the ones that uh, don't always or hadn't always had the most innovation. Like for example, agriculture, like the ones that have just been around for so long and now seeing them over the past few years really get that attention. And as you shared, focus on how they can do things more like automatically or automate things or even produce things better or quicker. And so I think it's really interesting to think about those kind of like, I guess, foundational industries that are really such a huge part of our country and see how you can help improve it.
Totally. I mean, I think agriculture is a very interesting use case because it was like biotech that really moved the needle on agriculture. Something like Monsanto and all the gene engineering and editing that they pioneered gave us a lot of lift in yield productivity. And I think we're at another interesting moment right now after call it a multi-decade lull in innovation architect in agriculture, where sort of equipment autonomy is getting really good. And it's an interesting moment to say, like, what does an autonomous tractor really look like, right?
Mhm.
How can you sort of have a machine that autonomously removes weeds? How do you sort of have a fleet of equipment that just operate themselves in a farm, sort of deployed sort of scalably across the country? I think that's the next frontier of innovation there. But you're right that it's not been just like a linear, like every 5 years there's a major business. It's maybe like every decade or every 2 decades, there's probably like one or two businesses that drive a step change in productivity for these kind of industries.
Yeah. And where do you see, I guess, like the general physical world going in 2026? If there's any trends that you see coming up or big movements that you feel might be happening?
I think the physical world is constantly in flux. It's hard to have these conversations today without talking about AI and the impact of AI. Um, I think that there are some obvious use cases around, if not outright automating, at least giving a lot more leverage to the sort of intellectual labor side of the physical world. How do you plan? How do you design? How do you coordinate between different players? How do you do sort of quality control in as much as you can read documents and images a lot more effectively now? But I think the real pressures right now are you have inflation driving all prices up across every single sort of line item of any physical world industry. You have an exacerbating labor shortage. It's been bad getting worse, and it's now getting a lot worse with immigration policy. Um, and you have tariffs putting even extra pressure on the prices of a lot of imported materials. Um, so it becomes less about, for me at least, call it digital AI or how can I extract information from documents better, but physical AI. How can I make machines a lot smarter? So instead of having sort of a crew of four go and do a job in a building, maybe it's only a crew of two. Or maybe instead of hiring two guys in a truck, to like pick up trash for me, I can have a robot that does that and I don't need people anymore because I just can't hire people anymore, right? And it becomes less about how can I sort of like automate my RFP, RFQ process and more around how can I go and source from geographies that are at a more sort of competitive cost basis in the current tariff environment in a way that like sort of I trust that the quality I'm getting is good and reliable and I'm getting things on time. And that's a much more exciting use case. And across all of that, it's like, okay, how do I sort of rethink financial products across the sort of the capital stack of these businesses as interest rates are quite elevated in this market moment for the first time in a couple of decades.
Mhm.
And AI can sort of help across each one of those labor materials and capital. But it's probably not going to be standalone AI. It's probably going to be new business models altogether that leverage AI for better user experience, way faster sort of overhead operations, but ultimately probably make their money some other way. They're making it on getting work done. They're getting it on commissions on importing materials. They're getting it on providing a service in a differentiated way. Um, and that's what excites me the most right now.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you mentioned too, is that it's always like the physical world is something that's always changing. So as you mentioned, it's something that just at any point in time things could look differently. But I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up about how um I guess like political economic factors coming in like inflation and labor shortages and things like that can end up sparking new ideas for businesses within these industries.
Yeah, and there's always new things, right? Like
Mhm.
no dull moment in the physical world. Administrations change, sort of global geopolitics change, climate is actively changing, right? There will always
Mhm.
be something new. It's not a stagnant sort of set of industries by any measure. Um,
Yeah. And I know we kind of joked about earlier no picking favorites, but for you, do you have like a certain industry or sector that you've really enjoyed, particularly over the past year?
I've been spending a lot more time on robotics and physical AI.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of investment, a lot of interest going into the space for all the reasons that we just discussed. I think there is a maybe surprising is not the right word, but a large amount of interest and investment in humanoid robotics in particular. The idea is that if you can have like the panacea machine that does everything for everybody, you can just like make more of the one machine and like your market is infinite. At the same time, there is a lot of sort of weariness in the US around sort of Chinese robots and the kind of demos that we're seeing out of China and their ability to produce hardware very cheaply at better and better qualities. And it's sort of, for me, it's this interesting moment around like everybody agrees that like robots are the future. There are a lot of manual jobs that we like as humans, sort of as sort of modern society, like don't want to do, or maybe should not do, that machines will do for us, and just becomes a question of who's going to make these machines and what will they look like, right? And there seems to be like some consensus right now that they will look like humans. I think they'll probably look very different. We joke that this the sort of R2D2 versus C3PO future of robots. And I'm more of sort of camp R2D2 at the moment. Like the human form factor is actually not great for a lot of tasks. Uh, so let's design machines that are sort of specialized for the thing that they need to do. In the 80s, the Japanese wanted to automate their car factories, and they thought, oh, we can have like a humanoid robot to replace the humans that we have on these production lines. And then they said, well, the most important thing they have on them is arms. So they have like basic humanoids with two arms. And then they were like, actually, they only need one arm if they're a robot. And like, actually, they don't need a torso or anything else. And that's how we had like these sort of the robotic arms installed on all production lines right now, right? And it feels like we're going to go through a similar cycle now. We're designing humanoids because we're saying, oh, we're replacing a human. And then you find the one very productive task that the robot just does again and again and again for the rest of its useful life. And then you say, well, the humanoid form is not optimal for this. There's a more optimal form. And then you go and make that. So let's start there.
Yeah.
Uh, we've invested in a robot that picks up sort of the sweeps parking lots and garages. And it doesn't make sense for it to be a humanoid that just like bends over and picks up stuff and puts it in a bag, right? So it looks like a small car with a vacuum. And it just goes around and sweeps and dumps the trash on its own and charges overnight. We've invested in autonomous construction equipment where instead of having a humanoid push the concrete grinder pushes itself, right? And then becomes interesting if you can go and automate other construction equipments with that same tech stack. I'm going to take an existing piece of equipment, just make it run itself. Um, we're looking at examples from solar farms, for example. Um, it's like $100,000+ to hire someone to drive 4 hours west of Austin into the desert to go and put solar panels on racks and then maintain them over time. You can think about the one or three robots that would just have these kind of farms operate autonomously over the next 10 years. That's probably going to be a very valuable company. We're looking at all kinds of interesting robots sort of in farming between autonomous trackers, autonomous sort of weed extractors, etc. And there's probably a couple of interesting machines to be built there. Sort of construction is its own beast. $1 trillion is spent annually on construction labor in the US alone.
Wow.
Caterpillar is a $200 billion company. Um, and they don't even have like dominant market share at this point. There are other competitors as well. So if you look at that and you're like, how many big multi-billion dollar, multi-trillion dollar sort of robotics businesses are going to be created in and around the physical world globally over the next 10, 15 years? Probably a lot. So it's quite exciting. And I think the hardest part, the way we view it, is how do you make a machine that is like truly field ready? And then how do you sort of take it to market? That is the really hard part, like the go-to-market sometimes even more so than making the machine itself.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I'd love to dive into further is just that go-to-market piece because it's interesting to me to hear that it's like the hardest part of this. And so I'd love to hear more in your perspective why or where you see the problems arising.
So for much of the physical world, the incentive structures are such that overperformance is not really rewarded, but underperformance is severely punished. So nobody's incentivized to take risk, and nobody has like the bandwidth or the luxury to take risk. Very few people do.
Mhm.
So if you are I don't know, like you are the facility manager for a McDonald's franchisee, right? And you oversee maybe like 4 or 5 locations in Jersey for a local owner. And I come to you and I say, like, your parking lot is a liability for you. Like, if you have a lot of trash or anything that's harmful or dangerous, you might be liable for it. You need to like clean it. And I have a machine that's going to clean it for you. And he says, well, I need it clean. And I like pay the local cleaning shop to do it. And like, I know what to expect from them. Like, how good is your machine and what are your references that I'm going to like park something to the side of my building to do that work for me? Like, prove yourself. It's
Mhm.
not oh, you're selling me like a cute piece of software and I'm going to like put $10 a month on my card and try it. And if it doesn't work, like, I'll cancel my subscription. Uh,
Yeah.
it's a lot harder. I mean, a more extreme example is like you're pouring concrete and the building needs to stand for 100 years. And I come to you and say, try my new concrete. Nobody's ever tried it before, but I think it's going to work.
Yeah.
Will you take that risk? Probably not. Um, so, how do you prove that your product works in the physical world? And how do you sort of engender trust? Is an art and a science that a lot of founders are sort of experimenting with and trying in real time.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, what we see, especially for robots, is you show up and you say, like, I'll take all the risk for you. Like, I will, I don't know, like paint your walls. Like my same sort of, I'm trying to sell a robot that paints walls. So you go and you say, I'm going to paint the walls and I'm going to use a robot to do it. And where my machine fails, I'm going to like have a human fix sort of the end product and you're going to get something that's like complete to your expectations, right? And I go and I do that for like a year or two across a couple of folks. And then I show them how well the robot works. And then they're like, why am I paying you extra when I can use the robot myself? Now that I've seen it multiple times.
Mhm.
So they start to rent it out from you because it's probably too expensive for them to just buy outright. And if they don't have their next job lined up, they don't want to like have a robot collecting dust. And then there will come a point where they say, like, this is a core part of how I do work the way I own my truck and I need it. And I'm just gonna like buy it from you. Very few folks have gotten to that point. Most of the experiments we're seeing right now are like, I'm gonna do the work for you with my robot, or I'm gonna like lend it to you on a job by job basis and like take it back when you're done with it. The dream is just make robots and you sell them and you're like done. Or if you're renting them for like multi-year contracts where you're not just like constantly moving them around. I think the constantly moving them around is where like go-to-market becomes quite hard. And
Mhm.
that's where like you end up losing a lot of money.
Yeah, and that is a really interesting point that you shared about people just being skeptical of the products. And like you said, if they already have someone that they've been working with for years and years to do some type of physical labor, they're hesitant to then bring in a robot to do that. It makes me think about it too, from like the agriculture and farming perspective. If you've seen pushback from people saying anything along the lines of like, well, we still need our farmers, like people being very protective of the farmers that we have in the country. Like that was the first thought that came to me is since it's such like a protected profession that people feel very strongly about. So I'm curious to hear about that.
Totally. I mean, the machines don't work that well for everybody just yet. And in a labor constrained environment, you don't want to like let go of your farmer for a machine, try it for 6 months, have it not work, try to hire that farmer again. Well, labor shortage, they have all the
Yeah.
leverage, right? So they're working for your neighbor and you're out of labor. Like that is a terrible scenario, right? Uh, so where we're seeing folks sort of try robots right now is where they have either growth aspirations or just like more work than they have people, as
Hmm.
opposed to um, in instances where they're like actively trying to downsize their overhead while winning sort of the same amount or more work, if that distinction makes sense.
Yeah.
So for example, there were sort of several robots that were trying to do in-hospital deliveries, especially during COVID. So instead of the nurse going from the patient bedside to the pharmacy to grab something and coming back, that could be sort of a 20-minute trip. You do 6 of those, you've lost 2 hours of patient sort of facing time. There were robots that sort of go back and forth. And when you talk to the hospitals, they were very excited to get these robots at a time where they're getting a lot more patients, sort of they're growing, right? But with sort of COVID mostly behind us right now, hospitals are not sort of growing the same way. And a lot of those sort of like decision makers are saying like, we don't want to fire people. Like now that we don't have like extra demand, we're not going to like take the risk of bringing machines just yet. I think in the long term, machines will sort of become more of an accepted default, but the journey there is not sort of linear or straightforward. And I think the challenge then becomes like, how do you gender trust in this machine? How do you sort of price it and sell it in a way that is very sticky? And how do you sort of over the long term convince these different sort of customers of yours that like, yes, like you can sort of outgrow your current folks, and as they start to retire, you hopefully won't have to hire like as many replacements over the long arc. But it is quite a tension. Like, yeah, if you're a farmer and somebody's pitching you a machine that does everything for you, you ought to be skeptical and you want to hold on to your people. So like, I get it.
Yeah.
But as a founder, that is your sort of real challenge. How do you sell this thing in as much as it really works?
Absolutely. And yeah, what you just mentioned there too about like any type of business where people like employees might be retiring, being able to bring in robots to, I guess, like supplement the work or take over for the work that they were doing, I think is really important, especially knowing that you focus on the physical world and there's so much data out there about how not enough people are going into the trades. Like the trades are industries that just aren't getting enough workers right now. And so being able to bring in something like a robot to support that industry and keep it growing, I think is a really good use case there.
100%. And I think that sort of the second order question then becomes like, are these robots going to be like ready and available at scale in sort of 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? Like if we think it's inevitable, over what time scale? And from a venture perspective, you want sort of like the most growth right now, right? But I do think we're sort of at an inflection point where these robots are getting a lot smarter with AI and a lot cheaper to make, at least outside of the US.
Mhm.
So it feels like an inflection point at a time where labor shortage in particular is getting a lot more acute. But it is also real that at least today, there aren't that many pocket in the market that are just like ready to absorb like thousands of robots at the same time. I think there will be like some niches, and we have some strong sort of hypotheses about which niches are most excited to absorb sort of hundreds of thousands of robots over the next few years. But I think like the robotics revolution is a little further out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for anyone who's listening to this episode who is a founder building a startup in the physical world, from your perspective as a VC in this space, what are some things that you look for in a startup when deciding to invest, or anything that you're particularly interested in right now?
Um, so I think there are sort of like there are different archetypes of founders that have really succeeded in these industries. There is like the call it very deeply connected into the industry archetype of founder. And those founders are often able to overcome a lot of like go-to-market and sales challenges because they know enough market participants who are willing to take a risk on them and their product, and sort of they're subsequently able to succeed. So in our portfolio, for example, we're invested in a company called Homeward. They're doing embedded financing for home transactions. So they work with brokers and broker teams to help them white label different financial products that facilitate sort of the transaction, like a buy before you sell, give a cash offer. Um, and a big part of their success is the founder, Tim, used to be a top broker, and he knows all the top performing teams in the country. So when he launched this business, he said, like, I built this for myself. when I was in your shoes, and you know me and you know how good I was, and now I'm offering it to you, right? So he was able to basically like embed his product with all the right top teams very quickly because they trusted him. That is quite unique. I think the other archetype then is someone who is both sort of deeply technical and looks at the industry sort of with fresh eyes to say, I can bring this technology to bear against this use case in a way that like is not obvious to anybody. And I think a lot of like the hardware and sort of robotics use cases are that it's roboticists who may not have direct ties to the industry who are saying, oh, like I can make this machine run on its own and like let me do that. And as much as I can do it well enough, the thing will just fly off the shelves and it'll sell itself. And we're starting to see some interesting proof points there. It's a little early.
Yeah, and I especially like the example that you gave, the first one about someone who already has like such a trusted network or community that just marketing to them is almost like a shoe-in because they have people like you shared, they already vouch for their credibility and expertise that it is a really good opportunity to sell that product or service that they're building.
100%. It is a very trust-based industry at the end of the day, right?
Mhm.
And you either earn trust off of your track record, right? And your social proof, or by bringing something sort of truly distinctive to bear. And that's sort of what gets us really excited. So if you're a founder building in the space, either as like someone who's been around for a while, if you don't know us already, you're probably like one more intro away from us. Uh, let's definitely talk. And if you're like a deeply technical founder who wants to sort of make a dent in the physical world, we're your shop too.
Amazing. And one fun question for you is if you could give a shout out to anyone in tech who's doing something cool right now, I would love to hear it. Could be another VC, could be a founder, operator, anyone is fair game.
There's so much cool stuff happening in tech right now. I recently read sort of Super Agers by Eric Topol, and it talks about sort of longevity and all the new sort of science around longevity. And he does a really good job sort of reviewing all the latest data and providing sort of evidence-based advice um, around sort of health and wellness. And I thought that was one of sort of the more thoughtful and detailed reads around that space that I've read in a long time. So shout out to the biohackers out there.
Yeah, longevity is a good one. That was a good shout out. Raja,
Uh,
this has been.
someone with two trackers on his
Oh my
wrists.
gosh,
Tell you.
yeah. I know. Maybe that'll be the next thing you get into if you haven't already.
The Arrow Biohacking Fund, exactly.
Raja, this has been such a fun episode, and I've so enjoyed having you on the show to talk about everything that you're doing at Era. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect.
I'm Raja Ghawi on all social media. Find me on LinkedIn, find me on X, and Raja at araventures.com otherwise.
Amazing. And I'll include those places in the show notes so our listeners can easily find you and connect. But thank you so much again for coming on this week's episode of Built and Backed.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Ashley.